The following podcast is brought to you by PeacemakerNetwork.com. PeacemakerNetwork.com. Audio is provided by Pixabay.com. That's Pixabay.com.
Regarding the Karen Reed trial, there is one thing that everyone agrees on. There was not justice for John O Keefe. We may never know who killed him, all because of an investigation that wasn't. We're going to talk about that on today's Charlie Crimebuster. It's what some people are calling, well, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. The Charlie Crimebuster name and all forms and abbreviations are property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent unless or until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains adult subject matter. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to another Charlie Crimebuster podcast. Glad to have you aboard the Charlie Crime train today. Boy, we're talking about the investigation that wasn't. Karen Reed has been declared not guilty. However, it's basically based on, well, reasonable doubt. So why did that take place? Why do we not have justice for John O Keefe? We'll talk about it. First, I'd like to take a moment to welcome you to the podcast. If you're a first-time listener, we always encourage those who are first-time listeners to reach out with a shout-out. Even seasoned listeners, reach out with that shout-out. We're thankful for the thousands of downloads, and we'd love to hear from you. You can reach me, Charlie Crimebuster, at gmail.com. That's Charlie Crimebuster, gmail.com. While you're at it, also check out our sponsor, PeacemakerNetwork.com. We're talking about the brave men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. We're talking about those brave men and women of the military, law enforcement, and those special first responders who are always there when we need them. Well, we can be there for them as well. You read all about it, PeacemakerNetwork.com. If you'd like to get caught up on other podcasts, we'll go to CharlieCrimebuster.com. You'll find our podcasts listed there, over 300 of them. I think James Buckland says it best when he says you can binge-cast. That's right. You can just listen to all the true crime you want to listen to. Most of the cases that you are interested in, well, you're going to find them right there at CharlieCrimebuster.com. By the way, you can also go to the YouTube channel. They're listed there as well. Now, I'm going to make it very easy for you because in the show notes, we're going to leave links. Links where you can reach me. Links to PeacemakerNetwork.com. Links to the website, links to YouTube. You'll find it all in the show notes. Well, today we're going to be talking about Karen Reed and the investigation that wasn't. You see, there is a cop dead, and there is no justice. There is no justice because there was not an investigation, not a real one. That is why I'm calling it the investigation that wasn't. Now, we all know the story by now. On that cold January night, Karen Reed and John O Keefe went out with friends. They went to 2 local bars. Then they drove out to Brian Albert's home for an after party from the bar party. But here, my friend, is where it gets rather tricky. Karen says, well, she let him out and he went into the residence. The people in the house, they say John O Keefe never went into the house. The defense has said that there was a fight in the house. He was attacked by a dog and then placed on the lawn to die. The prosecution says they're pieces of taillight. Karen's taillight from her car in the yard close to John. Both sides have placed evidence in their case to bolster their own theories. The first trial, hung jury. The last trial, Karen Reed not guilty, largely because of reasonable doubt. All of this is leaving John's family without justice, leaving the rest of us scratching our head, unsure of what really happened. We simply do not know. But what we do know is that John O Keefe did not go home that night or that morning or any other night or any other morning thereafter. The next morning, he was found on the lawn of Brian Albert, laying in the snow, 2 black eyes, in bad shape, taken to the hospital where he died. So this is where the investigation that wasn't really started. Now I know that what I'm doing, many people call it Monday morning quarterbacking. You see, it's so easy to say what should have been done at the weekend football game. It's easy to say that on Monday morning. Yet, this is what successful teams do every week, right? The next week, they look at the past game. They review their mistakes. They see their weakness. They correct those mistakes, and they turn the weakness into strength. And that is what we hope that all the law enforcement agencies involved in this case will do today. And it's what you and I are going to do as we look at it. First things first. Even the seasoned cops at first thought that there was a possibility that John O Keefe had been in a fight, rather than hit by a car. Yet, later, there were reported pieces of carrying stellite on the lawn. Regardless of what really happened at that moment, where he lay at the yard there was a crime scene, and the very first step, you got it, secure the crime scene. You see, securing a crime scene will preserve the integrity of the evidence. You see, once you get past officer safety and securing others, making sure everybody's safe, the most important thing is to secure the evidence. This will prevent evidence from being destroyed and will prevent evidence from being manipulated. Did you hear that? Preserve it from being destroyed and are manipulated. 2 things that did not happen in the investigation that never happened. First step, secure the entire scene with tape. A great example of this case is what we will be talking about next, and that will take the country's attention, the killing of the Idaho students. There, in that terrible, terrible scene, they immediately taped off the entire yard and beyond, including the house. So what do? You secure the scene. Didn't happen in the investigation that wasn't. Next step, you keep a crime log. You log everyone that comes into the crime scene, who they were, when they arrived, when they left, as much as possible, what they did on the scene. Well, at the John O Keefe crime scene, lots of people pretty well went and came as they would at will. No crime log. See, here's the problem when you do that. You give people an opportunity to plant evidence. Whether evidence was planted or not, there was without dispute the opportunity to plant evidence. But hey, you say it was cold. There was snow. Well, again, the Idaho college student murders, guess what? There was snow there as well. And that crime scene was extended way beyond the house to the yard. They set up a crime scene. They guarded it for days and weeks. Why? Because the students deserved justice. I'm telling you, the defense is going to have a difficult time stating with any justification that there was planted evidence. You see, John O Keefe deserves justice too. But preserving his crime scene? Sorry to say, that ship's already sailed. When a case goes to court, you want to be able to say that the crime scene is as uncontaminated as possible. You want to secure an even larger area than the immediate area. Then you work back from there. The entire yard, the house itself, particularly if that guy is dead and he was going to a party in your house. Even if you did not feel that you had probable cause to search the house, you can at least ask permission. After all, Brian Albert, he's a cop, and not just any cop. The cop that owns that house is a cop that is on the same police force as John O Keefe. He is the same guy, by the way, who just this past week, told the world on TV he would have taken a bullet for John O Keefe. So let me ask you, don't you think a cop that would take a bullet for John O Keefe would gladly allow you to search his house, if nothing else, to search it, to rule out the fact that anything happened in that house? You said, but what if that cop said, no, you can't? Well, what then? Well, you have to ask why. What is he trying to hide? Then you go get your search warrant based on the fact that John O Keefe was on his way to a party at your house, was let out of the car at your house, and ended up killed and lying on your yard. That, I believe, would get you a search warrant. Then, whether with permission or not, you search the house. You bring your crime scene investigators in who will search for blood, check clothes for blood, check shoes for blood, check for blood and DNA that we always leave behind. And if you find John O Keefe's blood and or John's DNA in that house, a house that he had never been in prior to that night, well, then you have a whole new ball game, don't you? On the other hand, if you do not find anything incriminating in that house, you can now devote your attention to what happened to him that appears to have happened outside the house. Well, we have no way of knowing either way now. Why? Because the crime scene was not secured properly. Now, you do also need to document people and their movements at the scene. This is why body-worn cameras are great for investigators and patrol officers. They can help document the scene as it was when you arrived. And you can also document what others are doing. You, of course, remove anybody from the scene that should not be there. And it's always best to have more than one officer there, so that no one person is alone at the protected scene. Again, this did not happen in the investigation that wasn't. You see, you have people gather evidence who realize how important it is to document carefully every single piece of evidence. Hey, here's a thought. You photograph it as it is before you collect it. And I can't believe I'm saying this. You collect it in evidence bags with the tools of forensic investigators. And those tools, well, they are not red Solo cups and shopping bags from the grocery store. Again, the investigators of the Idaho student murders. They were collecting evidence for days upon days in a secured, protected environment. They did not just drive by on their way to work and say, oh, by the way, several days later, I think I see something in the yard. You see, by that time, anybody could put something in the yard. The scene was unsecured. But this was the investigation that wasn't. Next, I would like to talk to you about how to handle witnesses in the investigation that wasn't, and other investigation duties. But first, let's just take a little break, and let's take a moment to share with you what we call Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Okay, folks, we've already told you that crazy crooks comes from all over and are in different sizes. Some of them can even afford Tulsas. The electric vehicles. This one, Scott Boble, well, hear it for yourself. And as always, our crazy crooks down here in the Sunshine State, well, they're often described, you know what it is already, right? Yep, it's a Florida man. Here we go. It happened in Hobie Sound, Florida. A Florida man accused of driving his electric car through a popular Palm Beach County restaurant to, quote-unquote, charge up his car at the bar. Well, now he's facing criminal charges. According to the Martin County Sheriff's Office, last month, Evan Scott Boble, 23 years of age, drove his vehicle through the popular Harry and Natives restaurant there in Hobie Sound. Did that in the middle of the night, moving tables aside to try to get a charger. Investigators say, they say that a surveillance video inside that restaurant, it helped them to identify this guy as a suspect. Detectives then get a warrant for burglary, attempted theft, and that was served this week with the help of Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office and the South Florida Task Force. The bond, set at $12,500. And in a post on social media, here's what the Martin County Sheriff's Office said, quote, unquote, "We appreciate the outstanding teamwork that brought this unusual case to a close and remind everyone, restaurants are for dining, not for docking your vehicle, that is." So this crazy crook, who was crazy enough to drive through a restaurant to charge his electric car, is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Now back to the investigation that wasn't. We've told you how the crime scene was not secured, and this is the platform in which the integrity of the investigation is established, or in this case, not established. Then it's time to gather the evidence in a secure way, documenting it properly, not the way it was documented in the investigation that never was. So let's talk about the witnesses. One of the first things you do is to get to your witnesses as quickly as possible, right? That's why we have crime dramas called such things as 48 hours, all describing how important it is to quickly interview witnesses. You do that so that you can gather information before it's forgotten, or before other people can gather together and get their stories all straight and on the same page. By the way, FYI, same pages rarely exist. People see things differently. You may recall in this trial that Alan Jackson, in moments of his cross-examination, he alleged witnesses made sure that they got with each other before they were interviewed. That is, in the investigation that wasn't. And you also immediately separate witnesses. This was not done. Neither of those things. They weren't really gotten to quickly. And it was not done that they separated these witnesses in the investigation that wasn't. They were not separated, they were not brought to the station, and they did not record many of these interviews. Now, in the trial, if you were following it, there were many times when witnesses would disagree with the written report from the investigator that interviewed the witness. Often they say, "I didn't say that." Well, if the interview was recorded, you could easily check and see if that report correctly recorded the witness, right? What a great idea! Too bad they did not think of it and use it in the investigation that wasn't. Now you say, what if the witnesses early on in the investigation refused to speak with the investigators? They do have that right. They have the right to appear with their attorney. That's a constitutional right. Yes, it is. But it can also become a red flag. A red flag that would cause you to take a more careful look at that witness. You see, the investigator, he could say, okay, your friend died. I'm sure you'd want to find out what happened as much as anybody. And if you did not do anything wrong, why would you not want to cooperate with the investigation? Good example, Brian Higgins. He was one of those third-party, what I call soddy guys. Soddy is crime slang for some other dude did it. Soddy. Some other dude did it. Well, Brian Higgins was one of those third party, or as my producer James Buckland calls him, Hitman Higgins. He should have been interviewed properly early on in this investigation. His phone should have been taken before he destroyed it. And his iCloud account should have been checked to see if the phone was active after he said he destroyed it. that's something that could cause some concern, don't you think? And the fact that Brian Higgins went to the police station in those early morning hours, that there were so-called quote-unquote butt dials between him and Brian Albert in those early morning hours, all that in itself can be suspicious. Now get this, he and others have been drinking throughout the evening. Now, if you've been drinking throughout the evening, would you turn around and go to a police station that's crawling with other cops after drinking and driving? With alcohol recently consumed? You're going there at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to do administrative work and move around a few cars? Well, at the very least, it should be checked out. For instance, you might ask, how many other early mornings did he go to the police station at 2 or 3 o'clock to do administrative work? Did he do that often? Had he ever done that? Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Logs and cameras should have been checked. People should have been questioned. Had they ever seen him at the station at that time of the morning before? His own vehicle should have been gone over with a fine-tooth comb. Now, it is true that he brought some of his own texts to the investigators between him and Karen, and between him and Brian. He brought his own texts. But since when do you allow people of interest to determine what you see and you don't see? And what do we not know that was on his phone because he destroyed his phone? You see, what you're doing in an investigation is not only looking for the guy who may have done the crime, but you're also taking these steps so you can eliminate the person as a suspect. Doing a proper investigation protects not only the investigation, but it can also protect the person that's being investigated. Now, we really do not know if Higgins is a proper suspect or not, simply because of the investigation that wasn't. You see, other relationships that Higgins had been in should have been investigated. Was he the jealous type? Had he acted in an erratic way before? You say, oh, but he was a cop, an ATF agent. That's why it's even more important to rule him out, or in. Otherwise, it could look just like it did to others in this investigation. It could look like he just got a free pass because he was a cop. Same thing true with Brian Albert. You recall, he was on the stand, and when he was asked if they came in and searched his house, he said, I wish they had. I wish they had. Meaning on the stand that he had nothing to hide. But did he? You see, we will really never know because of the investigation that wasn't. By far, some of the most pieces of evidence was the vehicle and the pieces of taillight that was found at the scene. First, let's talk about the vehicle. In this trial, many of us were flabbergasted when a police officer from another jurisdiction came forward who went with investigators for them to seize Karen's vehicles from her house, from her father's house, that is. When he went to her father's house with investigators to secure the vehicle, that same police officer testified under oath that the taillight on Karen's car was cracked, but it was not destroyed as it appeared to be when he was shown a picture of the taillight taken in the Sally Port of the Canton Police Department. Now, even though Hank Brennan made a point or two with the memory of the police officer, think with me now. If on that very same day, before that vehicle was touched by police officers, if they had taken the time to photograph it from top to bottom, then we would know for sure, right? If he testified correctly or not. If they had taken really good pictures of that taillight, then we would know if the taillight at the Sally Port looked the same way that it did when it left Karen's father's house. We would have seen ourselves the condition of that taillight at that moment. And if that taillight had been shattered, as revealed in the Sally Port before, then it would be hard to think that police tampered with the evidence. But this never happened in the investigation that wasn't. Now, there were also pieces of taillight found not only in the yard, but in the clothes of John O Keefe. However, because this material, these clothes, all of it kept in a shopping bag, it could have been commingled. It wasn't even checked into the evidence room till much, much later. No correct chain of evidence until it got to the crime lab. Easily, someone could have mixed the two together in the time before the evidence was checked into the crime lab. By the way, this is what happened in the O.J. Simpson trial. Evidence that was not checked in properly, which gave some room to reasonable doubt regarding the investigation. And, in fact, reasonable doubt appeared over and over in this investigation that wasn't. The criminal investigators at the crime lab, when it finally got to them, they appeared to work with best practices. But unfortunately, the way that evidence was gathered by law enforcement before it got to the crime lab, it became very problematic in the investigation that wasn't. Now, while I've been talking about the investigation that wasn't, there was another investigation that was. In a highly unusual move, the federal government launched its own investigation into this investigation that wasn't. And according to Trey Minor, a longtime Boston criminal defense lawyer, she said federal authorities have aggressively targeted local police in this area for decades, ranging from public corruption cases in the 80s to more recent prosecutions of state troopers, police officers, collecting overtime pay for hours they did not work. However, she did say that a federal probe in Reed's trial is unusual because it happened simultaneously with the state prosecution for murder. And this became a big plus for the defense. Now, incidentally, all the witnesses in that house that night were brought before a federal grand jury, and all of them were still consistent with their testimony. There was no fight, no attack, and John O Keefe was not in the house that night. That is from their testimony in the federal investigation. However, that investigation of that the feds did actually provide Karen Reed's defense team with over 3,000 documents. And guess what? The feds, they hired their own crash reconstruction experts. Those experts, here's the biggie, they concluded that O'Keefe's injuries were inconsistent with being struck by a car. And the defense was able to call these experts as their own crash experts. It was huge for the defense. Think with me. What if the feds had not investigated and the defense had not had access to ARCA and Crash Daddy himself? What if they did not have that to offset the prosecution's own experts that said the opposite? But again, because of the investigation there wasn't, well, the feds ended up investigating the investigation and brought to the defense a treasure of evidence they used in their own case. Now, it should be said that this federal investigation has not led to any charges of crimes by the police that investigated the crime. The federal investigation did not lead to any charges against the witnesses and other people involved in this investigation. None. But just the idea that the feds wanted to investigate leads one to think there had to be some probable cause to launch it, don't you think? You see, probable cause merits an investigation, but is not proof in and of itself that a crime occurred. Finally, one of the facts in this case is that the lead investigator, Michael Proctor, should not have been the guy to lead this investigation. He was close to the Alberts, and his own text revealed his own bias against Karen Reed. You can't wish someone dead. You can't call them names. You can't use terrible words to describe a person, derogatory, vile comments, and remain above reproach in an investigation. He should not be the one who led that investigation. Maybe that is why we have an investigation that wasn't. So, these are only a few things that went wrong in this investigation. Because of the way that this case was handled, it produced reasonable doubt. That reasonable doubt motivated this jury for a not guilty plea. Now let me say, she was not declared innocent, and we may never really know whether Karen is innocent or not because of the investigation that wasn't. But what is really sad today is the fact that more than likely we will never really know what happened to John O Keefe, this hero cop who was loving and fun and loved. We will never, probably ever, really know what happened because of the investigation that wasn't. This is Charlie Crimebuster, and until this time next time, I'm reminding you, be alert, be safe, for the life you save may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional information and podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. We would like to thank our sponsor, the Peacemaker Network, and also encourage you to support the first responders, military, and law enforcement personnel by contributing to the Peacemaker Network. That's peacemakernetwork.com. All music and sound effects are courtesy of Pixabay.com. That's Pixabay.com. You can also support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, tag @CharlieCrimebuster, and then click the subscribe button. By doing so, you'll be notified each time we drop one of our shows. Another more convenient way for you to listen to our podcasts, or for you to say to your smart speaker, play Charlie Crimebuster. If you have comments or suggestions, we would love to hear from you, so please send them to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Or you can call or text us at 407-917-2211. That's 407-917-2211. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you will join us again for another exciting crime episode with Charlie Crimebuster.